Welcome to session 2 of our Growing Through Social Innovation webinar series. Today's webinar is going to focus specifically on funding resources around social innovation. We have a fantastic lineup of global speakers, including folks from the US, the UK, and Portugal. Before I turn it over to Dr. Wright to introduce our speakers, I want to run through a couple of quick housekeeping rules before we get started. Please ensure your microphones are muted throughout the presentation, as we are recording and live captioning today's session. And if you have any questions at all throughout the webinar, make sure to use the Q&A box down below, and we'll get to your answers at the end of the presentation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Serenity Wright, Senior Associate Director for Social Innovation at UK Innovate, who will be moderating today's panel. Over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rohan. And we appreciate all of your support as we work through this today. Very excited for this conversation today around funding for social innovation and funding for the future, how we think about building people-centered, future-focused communities, and the work that needs to be done in implementing sustainable programs and financial models. So, Philippe, we'll start with you, but people saw your all's bios as they registered for the program, so they know a little bit about you. But as you introduce yourself to us, if you'll discuss what social innovation funding looks like for you and how you're positioned within Portugal social innovation.
Okay, thank you very much, Serenity. So, hello everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and share the stage with you, Serenity, Rachel, and Hugh, and everyone here. Going straight to the point, my name is Filipe Almeida, as you might know, and I'm leading the National Public Policy for Social Innovation in Portugal. So my perspective on social innovation is from a public policy perspective. This national program, which is called Portugal Social Innovation, uses European structural funds and national budget funds to accomplish two interconnected goals. On one hand, to promote social innovation and fund these experimental projects. On the other hand, to develop the social investment market as well. So we bring into the table these private and public organizations that we call social investors that co-finance these projects alongside with European funds that we are managed. And we've created specific financing instruments, and I believe we will get to that in a minute. And we've been funding these social innovation projects from this perspective. So my perspective is from a public policy one, which means that the final goal of the social innovation that we are funding is to test new solutions for social challenges that address pressing social challenges that might also influence and inspire the evolution of public policies. So our eye is on this. How can these social innovation projects and actually become an inspiration for social policy? How can they scale through social business as well? But how can we change the mindset and the paradigm in country based on these social innovation projects? And we do it with cross-sector partnerships alongside with private investors as well. And we have different instruments, from capacity building to outcome payment instruments. So we've created this set of different blended finance solutions with European funds, and we are testing this kind of top-down approach from a government perspective to develop an ecosystem.
Thank you. And we'll talk more about the public policy perspective later, because I do think it's so important and so critical, especially for us in the US as we continue to build and grow in this space for how we do better by our communities. Hugh, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Hugh Vasey. I'm a Deputy Director at UK Research and Innovation, which is the Britain's national public science and innovation funder. I work in part of the organisation called the Economic and Social Research Council, and the name kind of explains what we do. We're the largest public funder of economic and social research in the UK, about £200 million per year. So a good chunk of money, but not, we can't transform an ecosystem by itself. So my job really looks after our work around innovation, business engagement, commercialization. The latter two are certainly very new areas for a social science funder in the UK. And about 5 years ago, we started funding social innovation through commercialization route. So that's research commercialization. And we believe we're the first to have a dedicated fund for arts, humanities and social science research commercialization. What does social innovation look like to me? So the way I describe this in a nutshell in terms of what we're trying to achieve through this is we're trying to sustain and scale the impact of our world-leading research in order to meet societal needs, societal impacts. And that can be in the UK or it can be across the world. And that impact can be deep or it can be wide. And this is really somewhat experimental for us, but we've had some really interesting results and a very interesting journey to get here.
Yeah, so Hugh, I'm reminded as I listened to you do that introduction of when we first met a couple of years ago, and I was like, well, how do you define it? You were like, well, I really try hard not to. What are you going to do with said definition? But we had a conversation around the limiting nature, right? In which by stating this is what we do, then can change how we can and cannot interact in spaces or where our value is seen in spaces for support. So I love the follow-up there on it's deep and it's wide. In terms of finding sustainable routes there. Rochelle.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Rochelle Smalls. I am the director of Launch Blue Ventures, as well as the program director for Invest Blue. I have the absolute pleasure to be an esteemed colleague and a lucky colleague of Serenity and the team at the University of Kentucky. And so Invest Blue, we're an angel network that connects the community of Kentucky affiliated investors and innovators all over the world. And our kind of main goal is to help facilitate investments, provide educational support to those members, particularly folks who are new to angel investing and dipping their toe into early stage investing for the first time. And then lastly, our main goal in North Star is to remove some of the complexities and daunting nature associated with early stage investing. So I come at this conversation with more of an early stage investing perspective. And when I think about social innovation and what that looks like for us, I'd say angel investing has very much become more diverse thanks to a lot of different things. One, there's, kind of a diaspora, if you will, of coastal talent that has come and has spread to overlooked geographies and regions like Kentucky, like the Midwest and regions kind of across the US. And so with that coupled with kind of call it the economic mobility of women and folks of color, people that look like me. And so those two factors has really created a ton more opportunity in which we can create and activate more diverse investors. And that's what our goal and our role in charge is at Invest Blue. And when I think about how impactful our work can be, I really think about activating more diverse investors across our region where innovation is incredibly prevalent. And we have a ton of great founders and innovators that are doing great work and that are pushing the needle forward from a social innovation standpoint, but investment just hasn't kept up, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is our goal, is to kind of bridge the gap, bring education alongside with that, but really creating a place and a home where folks can learn how to invest and to deploy capital into the companies that they really are passionate about. So that's kind of how I look at it.
So let's stay there for just a second, because I think this framework of the ecosystem, especially for us here in the US, is really important from both a founder and an investor perspective, right? Since you mentioned that we are new colleagues, and one of the first things I told you was like, I'm so frustrated with this conversation that the money's not here. Right. And I do think my perspective was a little bit jaded because I've been working with Hugh for so long. I knew of Philippe's work. Right. So to know that there are spaces where there is solid investment, right, in this area. And I've seen it here as well. Right. But so as we think about building funding interest, but specifically for social innovation, social ventures, social enterprise, in addition to those pieces about growing the ecosystem by diversifying our founder network, those types of things. Why do you think it's so important to enhance the investor side and also to drive investment into that social venture side?
Yeah, no, happy to tackle this first. So for one, I would very much say that one of the core values that drives our mission here at Invest Blue is intentionality. And when we talk about this conversation of, why it is important and how we go about trying to bring, more interest, more support, more successful models to bear for our market, I very much think that intentionality has a ton to do with that. For instance, in an investor's intention to have positive social and environmental impact, they have to be intentional, right? You have to start from a place of intentionality. And for us at Invest Blue, we really see ourselves as facilitators in this work of trying to kind of create not only a space and place where innovator can connect with investor, but make it as intentional as possible. Creating those strategic catalytic connections and finding those mission-oriented investors that are not just looking for the traditional financial return that you would get, from investing, but they identify with the problem that their founder is solving, and are really compelled, right? They're compelled to realize that vision and give investment of their capital, time, advisory, opening up their Rolodex to be connective and be value additive. And so when you think about this from, a macro perspective, right? Our goal is to create net new investors that have that intentionality. But if we're able to open that caveat to make that a standard in which founders in social innovation get invested from that type of intentionality and those types of investors that don't see strategic return and social impact as a dichotomy or as separate, but they see that as complementary, that to me is a way in which we can see that, turn the corner a bit on being able to open up that conversation and hope lead the way and lead the charge so that more folks can see that, it's not a mutually exclusive conversation, but that financial return and social impact can be had and be realized at the same time.
Perfect. Hugh, I am still amazed that it's been 5 years since you all have been doing this, although my wisdom sparkles here tell me it's been more than 5 years, or at least felt that way, that it's been more than 5 years. From the ESRC perspective, as a funder who works specifically with universities, right? Because I think that's really an important part of this conversation that we really need to focus on. From your perspective, in terms of building interest specifically for funding social ventures, specifically in working with universities for commercialization, what are you all doing? Why did you choose this path? Why have you chosen to grow in this space? Why have you all found that it's important?
Yeah, so like all the great ideas, and I mean, I didn't have a grey beard when I started doing this. It's definitely been 5 years of hard work, but it was almost an accident. So it all started back when we were working on something called the UK's industrial strategy, which had so that's a government-led kind of investment vehicle that had an R&D element to it. And I worked on something called the Healthy Aging Challenge. So it was idea to build healthy longevity. And at the same time, the National Academy of Medicine over your side of the pond in the US was running its own Healthy Longevity Challenge, which had a commercialization element to it. And we agreed to work on this without really, thinking it through too much. We thought this was a good opportunity. And then it was my job to try and work out what on earth we were trying to do. And what we found was, we knew, because we were looking at healthy longevity, it was more than, there's plenty of investment space for kind of medical treatments, technology in the UK, just as there is in most of the world. But what there wasn't was really much space to get high risk, high reward social innovation off the ground. So we started working on this, and we had our endpoint in mind. And naively stumbling into this because historically we've not funded any bit commercialization at all. the existing structure, which is based around technology transfer offices in university, is very STEM focused, but particularly focused on a subset of STEM. So that is what you might call tangibles. So things that are going to create a product at the end, whether that's a vaccine, whether that's a new medicine, whether that's a new supercomputer. And social science is not like that. It's based on what we sometimes describe as intangibles, so service and process innovation in particular. So we ended up naively being forced to kind of reinvent the system, because the current system just there was no room for this. And that's what we built over 5 years. And we work with external organizations, first a social venture investor called Zinc in the UK, who are also very new, and now an organisation called ARC, who was formed by people in the university TTO sector who were working in this social innovation space, this kind of social service and process innovation. So we started off with this very specific purpose and started having to do a lot of work to encourage people to actually do this, because when we first surveyed our community, people were like, we are definitely not doing commercialization. This is a dirty word. We're not here to make profit out of our work. You know, we have a public university system apart from 1 or 2 private institutions. So that idea is very much there's a public good. And we did a lot of work around that. And that's why we talk about sustaining and scaling the impact of research. So it's commercialization, but for the purpose of social good. And that's how we really landed in the social innovation area. The more we've done it, we've realized that actually there's a huge space here we've opened up. And it's not just in social science and arts and humanities. Our sister councils, so there's 9 councils across UKRI, from our innovation agency through to the more STEM focused councils as well. And we've really noticed that this is a growth area. And we've built part of this system now, part of the ecosystem. We're probably where STEM was 20 years ago. And there are elements where we really have to carry on building up, and that's including the investor landscape. And that's how do you get people to understand the value of service and process commercialization, but also social innovation. We have social innovation agencies in the UK, like Nesta, which is a national endowment fund for innovation. We have something called Big Society Capital. We have a big lottery fund. So there are various ways to do it, but we are probably outgrowing the size of our social investment sector. So yeah, our success is great, but we've still got a lot of work to do to build up that pipeline. And it's great that we've gone from a point where we're going to do this specific thing as part of the Healthy Longevity Grand Challenge to actually recognizing this is another route for impact for research, particularly because research often has this problem of cycles of funding. So you'll do your 3-year research project, you'll build up these incredible links, and you're starting to make a difference, and then the funding ends. So a way to sustain that post-funding is hugely attractive to us as funders who are trying to get that social impact, but also to the academics who, if you're an impact focused academic, you don't want to leave it, but you have to because there's no money to carry on doing it. So if you give people an opportunity to carry on doing that, there is certainly a big audience for that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think that's such a credible vulnerability point to say that we stumbled into it by accident, because I think it proposes a framework here, right? There's an intentionality in that we started here with a healthy aging, but we knew and we saw we could go here. So expanding to this whole initiative, this whole extra council was not necessarily the focus, right? But we acknowledged what was coming out of this. Whereas while I think social innovation was started for the University of Kentucky from a very intentional lens, we went out about it very differently, right? We will do all the things for all and figure out then what are our critical areas of focus that we need to focus on. But like you, there's so much out there and we're still trying to figure it out. Which Philippe, for you is why you're here. For people like me, people like you, and many of our universities who have come at this from a very, some accidental, some intentional, some just because it's landed in their tech transfer offices and now they need a plan, they need to know what to do about it, right? But as the most seasoned and tenured program on this panel, if you'll just take a minute and reflect back a little bit on things you wish you knew in the beginning, or critical things that were in place for you to be so successful, and to really work to aim towards that evolution piece for public policy, which, you know, my whole goal for this panel is just to get you to say that that's the core of the thing as many times as I can, because that's the change I want to see happen. But for you, so from the beginning, what would you tell yourself now? What is your advice to folks like you and I, as well as some tools, tips and tricks?
Okay, I will share my perspective on that. Let me just go back a little bit to pick on something that Rachel said and also you to make these connections. And just to clarify, 10 years ago, the Portuguese government decided to create this national public policy based on 4 underlying beliefs. First, the idea that the social challenges are becoming more complex and interdependent. Second, the government and the public sector would never have enough resources or competencies to deal in an effective way with all these challenges. Third, social entrepreneurship and the social sector and the private sector could be an ideal context to test new solutions for these challenges. And fourth, all of these can be better achieved through cross-sector partnerships. So these are the underlying beliefs behind the creation of this top-down approach from the government. Of course, we had already some dynamics on social entrepreneurship in Portugal, but we needed to organize that. And we took the opportunity of using European funds, and it was the only member state in Europe to do that. So we were pioneers, and we still are the only country in the European Union that has a national public policy for social investment and social innovation. So this was behind the idea. But let me just go pick up with something. I didn't answer your first question completely when I heard Rachel about how do I see social innovation. Actually, we have a definition for that. We have a definition because we have to approve hundreds of social innovation projects. So we need to have a clear line. This is not exact science, but from our perspective, social innovation project, which is an experimental project, social innovation is a result of the development and implementation of a new product, a new service, a new methodology, or a new practice that intentionally aims at generating positive social impact. Intentionality is there. And this positive social impact, we can break down this concept in 4 main things. Promote autonomy on those that are more vulnerable, fight inequalities, strengthen social relationships, and intra and inter-community bonds. So these are the main ideas behind the projects that we approve, hopefully with a systemic perspective effect. And I want to add one more concept on intentionality. So it has to be intention, this impact, but also additionality. These new solutions must prove as much as possible that they can provide an impact that we cannot achieve with the current ones, the current solutions. So this is how we frame social innovation when you want to decide what to fund. And let me pick up on you, because you, Vazi, not you, Serenity. You. I don't know if I'm spelling it right, but at least saying it right. You. Because actually, after the first 30 million euros that we put on social organizations, we opened up the funding for any organization. And because I am an academic and I know that applied social science research is also social entrepreneurship in some cases. So we opened up the possibility of funding any organization, and we are funding also 13 universities, Portuguese universities, that do applied research with the community, testing new solutions. So this is social innovation as well. And actually, we are picking these research projects on the point where you were saying that they no longer have the public fund for that. So we are funding the late stage of the project when they want to really get a little bit deeper with the community and test these solutions and provide impact and measure impacts and so forth. And now we're developing. Just to have your perspective on the numbers, keep in mind that Portugal has 10 million people. It's a small country, a very small country. But we were able to approve 698 social innovation projects in the past 6 years. We mobilized around 101 million euros of European funds, plus 51 million euros from social investment of 848 investors. More than 500 are business corporations, but we have the biggest foundations and also municipalities, because we opened up to public organizations, public institutions as well as investors. So Portugal Social Innovation became the main catalyzer of the whole ecosystem. This is the scale. And even these 152 million euros that we put on the ecosystem, remember that of the 152 million euros, 51 comes from private and public organizations that decided to co-fund these projects alongside with us. This is a revolution for our country, because it's changing local government perspective when they fund and then follow up these social innovation projects, because they are changing the way they do policy at the local level. It's changing the investment paradigm in the big corporations and the big foundations, because they are looking at social innovation from a changing perspective. So they know that they are seeing the corporate social responsibility from a perspective of system change that can really benefit the business as well. And this is happening now. And this year, only this year, we are about to approve the first 200 applications of this year for 40 million euros of public funds, plus 10 million euros of social investment. So the first 50 million euros only this year. So for a project like in our scale, that is huge. Last thing, we are also financing not only social innovation projects as we are defining them here, but also social innovation incubators, which are these structures at the local or regional level that provide capacity building for social entrepreneurs, working very closely with municipalities and even universities and social and private investors as well, and trying to develop these more local social entrepreneurship ecosystems. So this is, and I didn't answer your question, sorry, but I think that this is important to frame all the way through. Now, I'll be as quick as possible. Let me just say, what have you learned from this experience for the last 10 years in Portugal? First, we learned that different financing solutions is a very effective way to develop an ecosystem. And we have different financing solutions with different models of funding. Second, blended finance solutions that mix both public and private money do work. They are good solutions, and we prove that it really works. Third, the Portuguese government decided to create this national agency that I'm leading with a clear mandate to manage these funds. And this was critical because we became a clear door where everyone knows where to knock when they want to talk about social investment or social innovation. Fourth, we've created an activation team of regional representatives in my team that work daily with social entrepreneurs, social organizations, universities, investors, municipalities, making connections among them, between them, and helping to transform good ideas into good projects and then to good applications. And this is critical. Municipalities became key strategic partners. Incubation is an effective way. And actually, one of the things that I would change, because we didn't realize that these social innovation incubators could be really an important way to develop the ecosystem. And we didn't have financing instruments just for that. Now we have. That's something that we've changed. And we also learn to equally value disruptive innovation, but also incremental innovation. Innovation that brings up new methodologies on top of solutions that already exist. And we equally value those, because innovation has not to be just disruptive. And well, just one more thing. one of the things that the main challenge that I have today, and one of the things that we didn't do as good as we should, was that we have to bring the public administration, public policy more close to this ecosystem so they can really be inspired for this. It makes no sense that social innovation is being funded even from a private perspective, but then public policies that really can scale these solutions are in a different direction. Makes no sense. And we have to make this connection between them. And finally, we are investing on in an approach of measuring the impact based on public budget savings. So this is something new that we are doing, so we can monetize and bring an economic value to the impact based on public budget savings that comes from the impact. That's where we are. Sorry, Serenity, for taking so long, but a lot of questions answered all at once.
No, that it was, it was, and I have so many more questions now, but I will hold them in the hopes that we get time at the end. But you know, you focused very intentionally on the importance of things that require or that support incremental change, right? And that Hugh, you mentioned it as well. You called them intangibles. And I want to come back to this because we have actually seen wild success in this area. And the vast majority of our focus and work on campus has been in this area. And I do think it gets missed. But as we think about a theory of change, right, and creating systematic change through these types of intangibles, right, the service innovation that can really lead to the public policy evolution that we need, or to identify the ways in which we need to make change for our communities. For you all as a funding agent, Hugh, can you talk about working more, right? Because we're still a little bit younger than you all are. So can you talk more about working with universities around developing and scaling, particularly more interested in the mass scale of the type of intangible solutions, trainings, web services, those types of things, and then how you all use that as a theory of change model for a systematic change writ large.
Okay, no small thing to answer there. So whole systems change. So I think if we start at the beginning, we could see, you know, the UK is heavily service-based economy. About 70% of our GDP is from services, and you know that's not uncommon in a developed world. So yet we had no way of doing research commercialization in that way. So if you look at it in that way, it's utterly bonkers. But we had quite an uphill battle in that universities were highly skeptical about this. So the resources in this area who were dedicated to commercialization were tech transfer offices. But most of them had come through a learning cycle where they were looking at what you might call IP heavy commercialization. So it was stuff where you could capture and protect that intellectual property. Now, the problem with service and process innovation is you generally can't. Now, so, you know, there was resistance at that end, and then there was resistance as well from academics because there wasn't, well, I guess there's two elements. One, that people saw commercialization as an evil is probably too strong, but not something that they wanted to do. You know, it was about making money. It wasn't about making impact. Okay. Yet people were doing it. I think they weren't really seeing it as commercialization. And it tended to happen in a very, you know, there were areas where this had developed. We'd had lots of kind of, I guess, multiple evolution in different places. And they tended to do it for a bit and then fade away because there wasn't any systemic support. And then the third element we had, of course, in an academic career, certainly in the UK in social science, commercialization was not on your tenure committee's list of things they wanted you to do. So it was a kind of additive extra thing to do in the spare time. So we had a number of things that were not in the right place for us to actually grow this. So we're recognizing it as one part of it. Solving it is more difficult. So we built out this program that had very much a idea of spreading the word and a training support as well. So we started actually, our first port of call was the non-academic staff in university. By giving them, so we have a mechanism called impact acceleration accounts, so that's devolved funding to about 32 universities in the UK, and they give out relatively small amounts of money. We gave them some additional money to really develop, so it could be used to support a person who could become specialist, or at least begin to specialize in the commercialization of social science. And that was about a year, and we used that as pump priming because we knew commercialization funding was coming, and we knew we would struggle for this to really happen without those experts in the institutions. And that really, I mean, the return on our investment for that was huge, because really once you start a bunch of bright people going and they get behind an idea, it will grow very rapidly. It was growing somewhat spottily, and there were some other schemes that supported it as well. So Research England, which is another part of UKRI, was also funding something called the Aspect Network, which was a network of universities looking at initially at business engagement, social science, but then it moved into commercialization. They created an accelerator, a catalyst, at the same time we did, unbeknownst to us. And so we both started almost simultaneously doing this early stage social science friendly commercialization. So we're giving out funding, we were supporting the people behind the scenes, and at the same time we were, you know, beginning to create these avenues and beginning to help people understand that commercialization wasn't just about, you know, creating a product and then selling it. It was about sustaining and scaling that impact. And these were very support heavy programs. So we had specialists who'd come on and really talk people right through the process from problem definition. So we didn't want people to come with presupposed ideas and try and fit a solution to a problem. We wanted them to actually think, what problem are we, to that intentionality, what problem are we trying to change, and then work back from that. And not everything having to be an app. Anyone who's involved in commercialization in this area is sick to death of hearing about sodding apps. Sorry, apologies for my language. So we built this out with really skilled support, and just, you know, it was an experiment, a pilot, to see how it could go. And now we're up to a point where the level of applications we get are really high. We've got people who are sustaining and beginning to scale successful, you know, impactful organizations. It's very early days, so we can't put a definite number on it, but we are seeing the growth of various organizations, and that's brilliant to see. And they're successfully spinning out, and universities are beginning to recognize this as a growth area. So it's positive stuff. And, you know, I guess in terms of a theory of change, how do we see this? Well, I think it comes back to, I mean, we have a theory of change. I'm not going to talk to you about that in detail, but essentially it's creating an ecosystem that allows for the sustaining and scaling of research in order to meet societal needs. So there needs to be that intentionality, like we say, and then their sustaining bit is why commercial vehicles work, and we're very open about what they are. They can be a social enterprise right through to an incorporated organization. So we're not worried about the shape of that organization or the way it's created. What we're concerned about, it stays around, so it sustains, and that it has impact at scale. And that's not an easy thing to develop, but it certainly captured the imagination of our innovation agency as well, who confusingly are called Innovate UK, we're talking to people from UK Innovate here, so it does get a bit confusing. But they're very interested in this as well, and it certainly feeds into the national mood in the UK. We have a very tight spending settlement recently on a governmental level. So the idea of social innovation being able to drive change is quite attractive to government as well.
And yeah, and it has to be more sustainable, right? Or it has to feel a more solid investment from a governmental perspective as well. But I do think, Hugh, every tech transfer professional that is listening to this now or will listen to it in the future will empathize with not everything needs to be an app. I think I got 3 app disclosures this week alone. But one of the things I think you and Philippe have both really talked about is the complex nature of the relationships within the ecosystem in general. So whether you're a funder, whether you're government, whether you're a private investor, or from a university perspective, the relationships in terms of how the ecosystem truly works together to move social innovation along, to have broader societal impact is really critical. And you know, Philippe, you led with it, and Hugh, you mentioned it, that the money's not in any one space, right? It's not with government, it's not in the universities, and it's not just in private equity. It has to be a mixed funding approach in order to ensure sustainability. And I'm not sure everybody truly really appreciates that, right? So I'm glad both of you mentioned that and called that out separately. And so, Rochelle, I'm going to pick on you a little bit as someone from inside the university looking to generate that funding, because I think founders in general, regardless of where they sit, right, whether inside a university or in the community, look to both government and university for funding, right? And as individual entities, and certainly not every space has the solid infrastructure like Portugal does to bring them all together. But, you know, so for you, as you build this program and from working for funding on inside of a university and to support innovations that are coming out of a university, what type of, like, be super tactile about this. What partnerships are we looking for? What are we trying to do? Right. I think Hugh just beautifully laid out the broader landscape for why we need to do this and what this looks like from a broader kind of outside a university perspective or outside coming into a university perspective. But so for you, supporting things from inside the university, what are you looking for in order to make, I need you to make it rain the money.
Yeah. Well, I would say this, even listening in on the call today and seeing the radical collaboration that both Hugh and Philippe have brought to bear with this conversation is super inspiring. And at least from our lens and from our perspective at UK, right? Being able to be a catalyzer. I mean, just hearing how their organizations were able to, pull in those public-private ties and partnerships and leverage those and utilize those. I feel that from working within the university, that is the asset that a university does breed to programs like Invest Blue, to groups who are looking to, couple investment alongside commercialization or alongside R&D and innovation. Universities are an incredible asset and provide, I would say, a wealth of capabilities that otherwise wouldn't be available, or that folks just wouldn't come first to mind. So first and foremost, I can start from the micro and then work my way up, right? But in the perspective of potential members of our angel network, being able to have access and proximity to incredible R&D talent is such an advantage. It also breeds opportunity for incredible return, right? Because we're literally sitting right in the middle of the hub, right, of the innovation that's taking place at UK. And universities are rich environments for launching new ventures. And so our role and our goal is to be somewhat of the landing pad or be somewhat of the gap closer of connecting that R&D innovation that's happening at the university and coupling that with capital and potential investors, and providing that kind of network powered capital, if you will. But as you extrapolate that a bit more, right? Invest Blue, you can look at us as a tool in the toolbox for the collective university network, right? Across disciplines, across departments, across colleagues of ours that are looking to engage with the global community of BBN, right? The global community of people who support Kentucky. And so, when Invest Blue grows up, we hope to be like Philip and Hugh in terms of being that catalytic organization, that catalytic program that help others to recognize that if you are Kentucky first, if you are Kentucky bullish, if you are Kentucky passionate, right, and you want to leverage opportunities to support the next generation of founders that are coming out of our state, that is the clarion call that Invest Blue is trying to breed. We're really trying to not only create just another angel group that is, investing in companies and creating financial return, but to be entirely mission driven about creating, net new opportunity and innovation and impact by, creating a mechanism in which it's an easy button for folks to get involved with investing. And so again, in terms of partnerships, right? That cross collaboration across disciplines, across departments, and synergies within our institution is something that our team is very much looking forward to connecting with. Also, I will say our team already does that in a myriad of ways through UK Innovate in terms of working with other departments across our university. And so definitely wanting to, fashion Invest Blue to be another way in which our university can engage with community, can engage with accredited investors, people who are interested in supporting entrepreneurs, as well as impact investors, people who are really, really impassioned and emboldened about supporting economic development and future entrepreneurs that are going to create the net new jobs of the future, right? I will say too, the other thing that I try not to take too long, but I think the unfair advantage that our group is looking to leverage with Invest Blue is this global nature of Kentucky connectivity. And when you look across kind of, other kind of groups that are investing in that same stage that we are kind of here in Kentucky, we've kind of kept it more singularly focused on entrepreneurs that are based here, which is phenomenal, because we often know that is the pendulum that grows economic engagement, right? You want to back the founders that are in your backyard. I also think that there is something to be said about leveraging the global talent of incredible founders, operators, and entrepreneurial minded folks, builders that have maybe left Kentucky but are still impassioned about Kentucky, that are impassioned about the companies that are being built here, and are conduits or that understand the unique problem sets that are here in Kentucky, if that makes sense. A lot of the social ventures that our team is very excited about being able to back, pretty soon. When we look across our pipeline, even now, there's something to be said about some very unique problem sets that our founders are looking to solve, that are unique to Kentucky, that are unique to the Kentuckian experience. And to the degree that some of those experiences can be rinsed and repeated in other rural contexts, in other regions around the world. You can probably consider, Kentucky and the region that we're in within the Southeast and the Midwest as an emerging market, right? And so the challenges and the problems that our innovators are solving, sometimes folks on the coast just do not understand. And so to be able to use the global reach that both UK has as a university, as well as individuals all around the world who are either born and raised in Kentucky, have a specific Kentucky affiliation or tie, and understand the problem set that our entrepreneurs are solving, to me, that is a unique thing that Invest Blue is bringing to the table for our university to leverage. There's a lot of alums that have been waiting around for a mechanism like this to give back, to leverage, and to support entrepreneurship back home, right? And so that is something that I'm excited about Invest Blue being, kind of a first at. But make no mistake, we are doing something that universities across the US have, there's a ton of universities and colleagues and benchmark universities that we know of that have a angel group that have kind of, their innovation funds or, mechanisms that help to, bridge capital gaps for their innovators. We're just having to bring it home here in Kentucky and to leverage our global community of Kentucky affiliated folks to do so. So hopefully that at least tackled a bit of that collaboration piece and who we're looking to partner with for InvestBlue.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Hugh, so Rochelle started talking about the economics of this, right? And the economics of supporting social ventures. So from your perspective, right, as we look at the relationship between economic and societal impact, and my positioning would be that they cannot be extracted, right? You cannot have one without the other. But from your seat and the work that you are doing, how do I'm not even quite sure which lens I'm taking this question, right? How do we continue to drive societal impact through focusing on economic development, or whether we're looking at it from how do we drive economic development using social enterprises or societal issues to make those changes? Thoughts from you and the ESRC on this?
Yes, I mean, this is a very live issue, and it's not just an ESRC issue. I think it's right across the R&I system in the UK, because there's a recognition that we should be doing more than just economic impact. Not saying that we shouldn't do economic impact, but we need to understand how successful we're doing beyond that. So there are a number of different ways people are doing that. There's frameworks around social return on investment, triple bottom lines, and these, cost benefit analysis, because often with our things, service innovations, it's cost saved, not just the profit of that company. And that's often the case with service and process innovation. The problem we have is a consistent way to do that. And I think, there is no one way to consistently talk about social return on investment. And with anything impact-wise, there's a very long tail of impact. So we're moving towards, and I wouldn't say we have the solutions here, a kind of suite of approaches to this. Now, on our own kind of theory of change logic model, it's about looking at outcome indicators, because we're not ready to get impacts themselves, but it's actually what's the health of the system? Are we moving people in the right way? And some of those will look quite conventional, survival rates of companies, number of people employed and the like. But we need to have a look at other things as well. And one thing I think you'll probably end up seeing from us relatively soon is beginning to ask the people actually commercializing to say, actually, just as you build an economic case for investors, you need to be building your kind of social return on investment case. And that could be different for different investments, but it's going to become increasingly important, because you essentially at some point you're going to have to get investment. Even if that's an impact investment, they want to know, what are you going to do with this? And as competition gets fiercer, it's likely we're going to ask people to do that. It doesn't mean that we're looking for more money in terms of your money equivalent in terms of it, but we want people to have a really good think about that and then allow us or them to track that. Because if you're saying you're an impactful company, you're going to have to prove that at some point. So that's the situation we are. We're likely to see it will be a suite of measures, because there won't be one simple measure. It'd be interesting to hear from Philippe, given that they're a little further along, about how they're doing this.
Yeah, and Philippe, take it away, because this is the part that I really love to hear from you, as well as any final thoughts on driving impact for public policy change.
Well, we have the same challenges as well, as you was saying. We have the same challenges. However, as I said in the beginning, we are trying to shift the perspective on economic impact more based on public budget savings. So this is a huge shift, because we are in the beginning of next year, we are going to launch very innovative instruments that pays the ventures based on public budget savings, not based on investment or cost or anything else. So to do that, we've been doing in Portugal, we've been developing an open access online platform that provides information to the public about the public investment per capita by person in different social areas. These are official numbers. And the European Commission, we've been negotiating with the European Commission, they agree that we could use those figures of public investment as the reference to pay for the social innovation projects and social enterprises that develop those projects. So that's a way to look at economic impact, because this is a game changer for government policies. If the government starts paying and making contracts based on public budget savings, is a way to monetize the value. But it's also a game changer for private investors as well. This is not the only solution, but it's something that we've been working on, because traditionally the social innovation projects that deal with social challenges, a lot of them would never be economically sustainable based on revenues, because they are dealing with the most vulnerable groups of society. They would never have revenues to make a social business and profitable. So we have to find other ways of doing that. And some of the private foundations in Portugal are now developing these solutions of shared revenues agreements with these organizations for getting back their investments in the long run. But I think this government perspective can also help. But we have the same challenges. We have challenges about impact assessment, impact management. We are now making it mandatory for everyone. But 10 years ago, we didn't know about that, something that we didn't do. But now it's mandatory for everyone to make impact assessments based on sound methodologies. And we're moving forward like this. But this is a top-down approach from the government perspective. This is very different from the rest of the world that is bottom-up usually in these kind of ecosystems. I know we're running out of time.
We are quickly approaching the end of our time here today, and I'm so thankful for each of you as we continue to frame the general landscape around social innovation, right? We started with a general definition of what is it in our webinar in August. This is really about showcasing the different maturity levels of different funding ecosystems for that, right? I think they're all there in various stages, right? But the money is there, right? And it's a matter of what we do with it. Rochelle and I have a friend who says, be as passionate about your data as you are about your impact. And I heard each of you make very similar statements in terms of how we communicate in order to get the funding, right? As someone who positions themselves as a change agent, Philippe, moving and evolving towards changing that systematic change in public policy, right? For all the things that you just said, to serve our most vulnerable communities, which is ultimately going to make us more sustainable and thriving communities across the board, and needing to be able to do that from a multi-funding approach, from a intentional public policy approach, but driving that from what we learn from our social innovations, from our social enterprises, I think is really crucial and really critical for how we move forward in these spaces in order to truly demonstrate and leverage the value of these in our communities. Right before I turn it over to Rohan, I'm just going to drop in the chat. There is a International Social Innovation Research Conference that is coming next September in Calgary. So if you're interested in learning more from a research and tools perspective, that is happening. And so with that, Rohan, I'll turn it over to you for any final announcements and to close us out.
Thanks, Dr. Wright. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you found today's webinar insightful. A big thank you to all of our presenters for sharing all of your expertise and insights with us. As I mentioned earlier, today's session is the second in an ongoing social innovation webinar series, with a third and final session planned for February of next year. And that session will focus specifically on impact metrics and numbers. So make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter and following us on social media so that you can stay up to date and learn more about that. Today's webinar was also recorded, so there'll be a recording that will be uploaded to the UK Innovate YouTube channel very soon. And we'll also send out a link via email for you guys as well. Thanks again, everyone, for your time and participation, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar.